Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. We're glad to have you here. We answer your questions 7 days a week. Not 5, not 6, not 7, but 7. Not 7, but 7. And so if you've got questions, of course, you can go into Makana and ask those questions. You can vote on the questions. You can chat about the questions. If you don't know what Makana is, you can go to officehours.global/join, put your email in, and we'll start sending you emails. Then you'll get links to that, links to Discord, all those other things. If you're not a Makana, don't worry about it. And if you're watching this show, don't worry later, some other time in the day. Don't worry about it either. You can go to askofficehours.global to ask your question. So askofficehours.global. You can go there. You can just throw your question in, and if it's well formed, if it hasn't been asked too many times before, and it's one question at a time, we'll go ahead and throw it in within the next day or two. So throw that in, askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Alex, what do we have?
All right, first question this morning is from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. Panel, I have 2 monitors that have refused to turn on after adding an OG Blackmagic bidirectional converter in the signal chain from ATEM Extreme Iso HDMI out to monitor screen. What am I missing? Thanks.
Jonas?
So one of the things that you should probably look into is the FPS rate or hertz rate that your monitors can accept minimally. One of the things that the Atem got really good is sending a slightly out of spec, slightly lying EDIT to the monitors to accept signals that a monitor normally wouldn't accept. While for us in video production, 25 and 30 FPS is a totally normal format, for most computer monitors, 30 FPS is actually below what they can display. Most of them start around 40, 50 hertz. So what could happen there is that when you use it with the Atem did all its little tricks to get it to work, but I don't think that the converters have that in them. So that's worth checking. You could probably get a little EDIT adapter and check it with that, or just try it with 60 FPS.
Good guy.
Yeah, sometimes there's this initial handshake that needs to take place between the monitor, and once you throw that converter in there, it's not doing that handshake. So I use these little Geffen HDMI detective pluses, and there's a little button on there that learns that handshake, and then you could take it out. You could take the monitor out and have it not there, and then when you reconnect it, it remembers. So I have one of those sitting right here hooked up right now to a monitor that was doing the same thing. So it's helpful. Or you can use, there's some cheap and expensive dummy plugs that may work as well that are really inexpensive. This thing's like $100-something bucks. So depends on what you want to do. But I'm pretty sure that handshake just isn't occurring when you're doing that pass through on the converter.
Next question.
Next question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. What is the minimum connectivity up and down to operate a Viz Vector VM instance? Any firewall ports need to be open? Thanks.
Go, Jonas.
I think bandwidth-wise, you probably want at least 1010 is what we give as our minimum spec. The control data isn't actually that heavy, so you are good with most signals. What you really want is a low latency signal. So if you have static LTE or you use a mesh networking or something like that, that increases latency and especially adds a lot of jitter, I would recommend to get as hardwired as possible. That's why fiber is so great, not only because it has more throughput, but also because it most of the time has lower latency, has a new attack from the ISP side, and less jitter. Then it really depends on how you want to get your multi-view down. You need a way to look at the instance. We use NiceCSV or Splashtop. Parsec is an option. And then it really depends on how good that quality needs to be. But one of the great things with cloud production is, even if you have a hiccup and you lose all your network connectivity, yes, you might miss like a playout or like a cut or something, but the show will go on. It's not like you having an internet hiccup will ruin the day and make the show not go live again. For ports opening, that's one of the great other things with cloud, at least on AWS, you do get a public IP address if you want to, and if you have your VPC set up that way. And then you can open up ports that you want on the instance. You can open them up to anywhere, so everybody can take over your instance. I would not advise on doing that. But what you can also do is just open specific ports and also only open them to your specific IP address. So that way you can say, hey, open up 8443, that is the port for nice CCTV, only to my IP address. That way you can access it, but no one else can. And then it depends on what you want to use. You can use NDI bridge. Then you open up the NDI bridge port, and then you can use that to get remote connectivity and remote signals. Or you can use TCP central control, and then you would need to read into that handbook what port of the API they're using. And then depending on the port that they're using, that's the one you need to open. One thing to keep in mind is there's two firewalls at play here. You have the firewall on the AWS side, and then you also have a firewall on the Windows side. I would highly advise you not to disable the firewall. I know that a lot of times, and especially at the early stages of cloud production, everybody went like, we'll just disable Windows firewall and suddenly stuff works. Take the time that it needs, or find someone who's already taken the time that it needs to have a functioning production instance that has the firewall enabled. You don't want to see the logs of attacks that you'll get when you disable it.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, everything that Jonas said, plus it depends on what your role is in the operation. A lot of times that we're handing off the keys to just do TD cutting. You can do it with, let's say, as low as 5 megabit up and down, because all you're doing is you're viewing a screen and then you're making some basic cuts. We use Parsec, or we'll use, Jonas has set up some really nice VPN stuff where the Stream Deck side is super lightweight for the operator, and they're just getting a high quality multi-view that's a WebRTC, or is it web stream, and he can control that bandwidth data. So that is, we have an operator in Thailand. Maybe he's not getting as much bandwidth. We can give him a custom multi-view that is a lower bandwidth, because he can crank that thing up. I mean, the picture quality of Jonas. I mean, Jonas, what bandwidth are you sending me on the big streams?
We're sending you 3 Mbits, but the thing that we're doing is it's a really nice encode. We just throw a lot of CPU cores at it, and we do a CPU-only encode at really high settings that is optimized for multi-viewers. That's why it looks so good, because we actually just spent the money on it.
And then the other one that doesn't look as good, the one where we have the 2 side-by-sides with the LUFS viewer, what megabit is that one? Because it doesn't look nearly as good.
That's 1.5.
But
that also is re-encoded 3 times. So what we also have is a multi-view that shows you the output with LUFS meters. That goes through 3 different processes till it reaches you. So that's a little less quality.
So to answer the original question, I've been on my iPad with vMix running in the middle of a cow field, and I can cut from that. So you can be on cellular at 2 megabit, because I'm not doing any heavy lifting. That I'm just basically viewing, and I can hit cut. I can change graphics. I can control the whole thing from a cow field over cellular. So, and then Jonas already answered the firewall port stuff. So I think we can move along.
Do the cows ever get in the way? You're in the cow field.
I was in the car. I was looking at the cows.
trying to get. That's the cow director. Next question.
This one's from the QR code. This is Alex in Petrolina, Brazil. Hi, the Blackmagic Studio 6K camera can stream RTMP and SRT to an ATEM HD8 or to an Atém Streaming Bridge. But can I stream multiple cameras from the same location and sync them on an Atém or Streaming Bridge?
Jonas?
You can stream it, but syncing right now is not a feature. You will get pretty accurate frame syncs still. One of the big advantages of SRT is that the latency is set. So if you set it all to the same latency, that will be the same latency. In our tests, you'll be within 2 to 3 frames, which most of the time that's where you get a little creative and you use a close-up shot. That's the shot where you also get your audio, for example, for a round table or like a presentation in front of a stage. And then the other feeds where you are not taking the audio with, that's your wide, your medium. No one will really notice if it's out of 2 frames-ish. But right now there's no way to sync it. And RTMP, I believe, is similarly, but Blackmagic has done some special things on both ends. And since they control both ends, they are also relatively close in sync. But I wouldn't do sports, for example, with it, where like it's really important that you don't see the ball, bounce twice, that will disorient viewers. But like for speech, most people won't realize that it's out of sync most of the time.
Yeah, I think real hard before I try to stream internally from one place to another. Usually there's other ways to get, if you're already on the internet, it depends, but if you're already on, some kind of network there, something like NDI is going to be better than trying to stream things back to it. Next question.
From the QR code, Marielle Jusha Miera and Wablo asks, how do you get video into vectors if it's in the cloud and the video is on the ground?
Go, Jonas.
So there's multiple options. You can use NDI Bridge. Viz RT actually released NDI Bridge hardware now that can do up to 4 streams SDI in right now. You can use SRT and then have an SRT gateway that brings it into NDI. Or what we do for office hours, all of our videos are on the ground, but we send them in through Zoom. And one of the great things that we're experimenting with is using this little MS-01. It's a mini forum, small, medium form factor computer that has a Decklink Duo 2 Mini. And the new firmware of the Zoom rooms can actually accept those inputs. So you can send up to 4 cameras into the cloud with that, pull them out with another Zoom room in the cloud, and that's a very low latency way of getting video to the cloud. But there's a breadth of services from like SRT gateways, SRT mini server. You can send 60 feeds up to Media Connect, convert them there to SRT or TS, something that Viz Vector can read. We personally would most of the time advise you to take an ingest server, convert that into NDI, and then send it into Viz Vector, just so you have a separation of concerns, and also you can manage problems by not needing to manage it on both sides. But Viz Vector also supports IP stream, so you could, in a pinch, just stream to Viz Vector directly with SRT, Larix, or any SRT encoder that you would want.
Next question.
Eddie Cookerdorfer from Vieira, Florida asks, what is so special about the Nikon Z6III with a partially stacked CMOS sensor?
Go, Jesse.
So with a back illuminated sensor, you'll find the circuit runs in parallel to the actual pixel. But with a stacked sensor, the circuit is not parallel, it's underneath, which gives the pixel more space to be a pixel. And this results in better image quality. Now, what's special about a partially stacked sensor instead of a fully stacked sensor is that you don't have to spend all that money on engineering for every pixel on the sensor. They're just doing it at the top and the bottom and not in the middle. While this doesn't give you the image quality benefits across the entire sensor, what this does is it allows you to run a lot faster without having to spend as much money as a Z6 or a Z9.
Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. The U.S. government has banned the sale of Kaspersky antivirus software in the USA. Which one are you planning to migrate to?
Go, Terry.
Hi. I would look at Malwarebytes. That's actually what we recommend to our customers, and also both on the business side and on the consumer side. We have it's actually the business side got renamed to Threat Down, so they have different plans and things. So I don't know if this is a business or just personal, but anyway, so that'd be my recommendation.
Alex.
I abhor antivirus software, period. I don't care if it's Windows. I don't care if it's Mac. I don't use them on any of my systems here. But I'm very careful with how I operate. As far as Windows is concerned, I just recommend sticking with Windows Defender, which is actually built by Microsoft. It comes with Windows. It's built in. It's non-obtrusive. It doesn't chew up processor resources like a lot of third-party stuff. I just find in all of these third-party apps, they just don't seem to operate as efficiently as the one that comes with Windows. So I've never really had a need to look elsewhere, but I've just had in my past so much troubleshooting and having to remove this stuff and trying to get the hooks out that these programs have. And this is why I don't have very much hair left.
Next question.
Next question from Andre Dole in Berlin. What's the difference between 1080p and 1080 PSF? Just stumbled about that configuring an Ultrastudio HD Mini.
Jesse?
The PSF stands for Progressive Segmented Frame, and this bridges the gap between an interlaced signal and a progressive signal. So most monitors, I would assume 99.99% of modern monitors are built for progressive, but there's still some need for interlaced signal feed. And if you're running a progressive camera into an interlaced signal feed, you would want to use PSF. If you're going progressive all through your chain, then I would recommend progressive.
So in the late 90s, Sony came to Lucasfilm and showed them a F700. And folks there said, "Oh, this looks great. Can we do 23.98?" Because they wanted, can we do our 24 frames a second? They're like, "Why would you want to do that?" I mean, the Sony engineers were like, "Why would you want to do something as low frame rate as that? It's not a Japanese thing to want to go below 60 frames a second." And so, and they were like, "The interlace looks so good." Well, they said, "Well, if you get 23.98, we'll shoot Star Wars with it." So there was a lot of engineering that went on to try to figure out how to take an interlace frame. Take it to capture something progressively, turn it into an interlace frame, and get it through a system so that it could be part of the pipeline. The PSF is what came up, and so things like the F950, which is behind me somewhere here, that was used on Star Wars, they had this format called PSF that made this happen. But that's really, it came up in that environment. I'm not sure if that's the only reason PSF came up, but it was not really talked about before then. But what it allowed you to do is get a progressive 23.98 frame. It's not, you can't do like 30 frames to PSF. PSF is specifically designed to get 23.98 through an interlace pipeline, as Jesse was talking about. So it is designed that all of our equipment is old, and it only does 59.94, but we need 59.94i, but we need to be able to get our 23.98 through that system and record and everything else. It's almost never used now. It's great that people still have it in the pipeline, because wow, is it painful if you end up with a PSF that you have to actually use. But you may still use it in things like, if I've got a 23.98 show, let's say a concert, and I got to put it on a satellite, my encoder doesn't do 24 frames, which is common for encoders not to. You can use something like PSF, although you'd probably be better off just converting it to ASI and wrapping it into the uplink. So anyway, that's a little bit more background on the PSF. Next question.
Jonathan Michelson in Buenos Aires, Argentina asks, and this is from the QR code, I'm remotely A/B testing 2 PTZ cams for a customer to choose from. What's a good protocol to follow? I use Parsec Pro and OBS. Cams are Birddog X1 Ultra and PTZoptics Move 4K.
Go ahead, Jonas.
I would say it depends on what you're testing for those cameras. If you're trying to test picture quality, let's just take the whole remote thing out of the line. Record it locally in OBS or anything that can record high quality files and send them to your customer. Because you don't want to have some internet hiccup and then be like, well, actually that camera normally looks better, but right now it looks a little worse. If you're trying to compare the UI and interface, I think Parsec will work fine. If you use OBS, it's really nice for that. You could use WebRTC at that point. OBS now supports WIP and WEB WIP support, so you can put that into any of the web servers that are out there, like Cloudflare Stream, that right now is still in beta and during that time free. That's what I would do. But yeah, if you're trying to A/B test it, I would just actually record it.
Next question.
Gary Bohan in Berkeley asks, and this is from the QR code, I'm a dedicated Mac family setup. My older iMac 27-inch is breaking down. I need to replace it. I was thinking of doing a replacement with a Studio Deluxe Mini. I use my Mac mainly for graphics, artwork, and Final Cut Pro.
Go ahead, Terry.
Well, I think with the Mac Mini might be a good start, but it really is going to depend on your your budget. You mentioned the Studio, so the Mac Studio, of course, is going to start in at least $2,000. But whatever you do, I wouldn't do anything less than a terabyte of storage, probably even 2 terabytes. Now, you guys are more in the video stuff there than I am, but I think that I would start there, and really depending on your particular budget. But I'd look at the maybe an LG 27-inch display and kind of go from there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Gary, all I do is Final Cut Pro, and I agree. We have a bunch of the 27s. We've retired most of them. We still have a few in daily operation. I recently replaced not recently, I guess it's about a year and a half now, 2 years ago, my 27 with a Studio. I'm not sure exactly what a Studio Deluxe Mini is, but it sounds like a great computer. I'd like to buy one. But yeah, I have the Studio with a couple of 27-inch displays. In terms of configuring, I don't think anybody ever in the history of forever has said this sentence, gee, I bought too much RAM. So, I mean, I max my, I don't know if it's max anymore, but I have like 128 gigs of RAM in my Studio, and the new version of Final Cut that came out the other day, it's working really good.
That brings us to the next question.
Mickey McAjor in the Manila, Philippines asks, what's new with Final Cut Pro?
Go ahead, Chris. Chris didn't even raise his hand. I just threw the ball. Like, he's like still running down the field. I'm like,
I didn't see that question come up. So it's new. It's the best Final Cut Pro ever. That's what they're calling it.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for we did the best we could. I mean, we had Texas features out. I mean,
there's another question coming up that I put. Somebody can delete that. So here's the deal with it. I think what's interesting about it is that, to my knowledge, it's the first time that Apple has bothered saying, hey, we have AI in Final Cut. Apple historically has always just been, well, it just works. And I think for the last 30 years or whatever, it just works is sort of their version of AI. But they're actually using machine learning in a new color analyzing tool. And I got to say, it's quite good. It when you run it and then you A/B what it did and what it didn't, you see that it made corrections that when I looked at the base frame, I didn't see that like say color tint or whatever was a problem until you run the filter and you look at it and you go, oh yeah, that is better. Thank you for that. So it's kind of like having a little Charles Klein in your computer. It also has some other features that I think are they're cool, but they kind of remind me, if anybody's old enough to remember when Final Cut 7 came up and they said, now with colored markers. Because it's like, really? You're going to make that like a headline feature? And so that feature, which I appreciate, is that you can rename all your color correction filters that you put in, which is kind of tidy because you can say, oh, this is the vignette, and this is my base grade, and this is my, effect, or, my Star Wars, my Mad Max filter, whatever. And then from the inspector, you can actually grab those now, and instead of doing copy and paste attributes, which works great, you can actually grab them out of the thing. Sorry, my auto camera thing is working. You can grab them out of the thing and just drop them onto a clip in the timeline, which you couldn't do before. The attributes window was a list of what you could do, but you couldn't actually like drag them onto another clip, or you can also drag them into the viewer. The other thing that's quite cool is they've added a lot of features inside the timeline index that allows you to do stuff like, where's all my clips that I've put EQ on? Where's all my clips that I've put a filter on? And that's actually quite handy. I will say, though, that I believe that the majority of people that use Final Cut Pro don't understand what the timeline index can do for you. And it is the secret hidden flex of Final Cut Pro. And if you don't understand it, turn it on, poke around, super powerful tool.
How do you use it on a day-to-day basis?
Oh God, I use it all the time. Have we used this clip before? That's one of the new features. You can search for, just show me things that are duplicate clips. and it just shows you all the duplicated clips. And when you click on one, it highlights in the window. When you shift click on a bunch of things, all of those things highlight. So let's say I had 20 clips that had that were all shot in a room with bad acoustics, and I figured out how to make the room sound better. And I'm a sloppy editor, so I forgot that I didn't put it on all of the clips. Well, I can now search for all the clips that have it, and I can, and if you shift click those and then move your mouse over to the timeline, all the ones that are shift clicked will light up like a Christmas tree in the timeline. And you go, oh, there's the one I missed, and you click it, and you can add the audio effect to that. Have we used this clip before? It has a search function. I can type in the name of the clip or just start to type the name of the clip, and it pops up and go, yeah, we have that clip. It's right there. Can you show it to me in context? Yeah. I click on it. The timeline jumps right to that clip. It's super powerful, and I use it all day, every day. I think it's probably always open.
Next question.
Jonas Daltel from Stuttgart asks, why should you update the Windows machines you use for production right now?
Jonas?
I have to admit, I didn't watch Office Hours the last 3 days all of the time, so I'm not sure if it was a topic. But if you are using Windows in your production, go in there, disable all the cool things that you've done so Windows Update can never work, and update right now. There's a Wi-Fi vulnerability out there right now that allows you, it's a zero-click attack. That's why it's so dangerous and so worrisome is, if you're in the wrong Wi-Fi and someone does a drive-by attack, you can get full compromised. So go in there, update it right now. It's kind of urgent, so go do it. This is not one you want to wait until the end, or if you're mid-production, just disable Wi-Fi probably, or look into it. But at least be aware that you probably should do it.
Wow. Okay, that's a big one. Next question.
From the QR code, A. Burrer and Flowery Branch asks, looking to replace my old CalDigit dock. Any recommendations for my M1 Mac Studio?
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I don't know which one you have now, but if you've got the TS3 or the TS3 Plus, there may not be any particular need for you to upgrade. But if you do, my recommendation is, of course, go over to CalDigit's website, and they've got a comparison chart. And on the right, I have the TS4 for my M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch, and just go through these lists and the list of items here, and make sure that they match what you need, because you maybe have no need to upgrade any further, especially at the TS3 Plus already. So there you go.
Go ahead, Alex.
We've talked about OWC a lot. OWC is a great brand. I really like, and again, it depends what kind of ports, how many ports do you need, but I really like the 11-port OWC Thunderbolt dock because this one's got, in addition to, not including the host port, but it's got 3 Thunderbolt 3 ports. It's got Ethernet there. It's got USB-C 3.2, USB Type A ports with 3.2. 10 gigabits per second. It's got memory card slots on it. So this one is pretty versatile. That's the one that I recommend.
Next question.
Next question is from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. A rental vendor for a large gig is requiring a higher union labor, as his truck will be on site and he wants to keep the union happy. No other shows at the venue hire union, and the client doesn't understand the extra cost. I'm out of my depth. Advice.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Good thing is that it's your client who's requiring it. I would say just
no. I think it's not. I think the issue is
it's the rental truck vendor. Well, I would still say probably reach out to a labor coordinator like Purple Tele Productions. I've worked with them a bunch. They're great people. They know the labor and union stuff in and out. And they sometimes are helpful, not only crewing your production, but also crewing them with union labor. And they have a lot of experience in dealing with delicate situations like that. The truck vendor might still just say you need to do it. And at that point, I would probably make it worth it's not worth the extra hassle that you'll go through debating with him.
Good, Jesse.
I'm not sure the scale you're working at. We might be slightly smaller scale than what you're dealing with, but all the renters we've ever worked with were union agnostic, and there's a big difference between doing what the union requires by their contracts and bylaws and keeping the union happy. And I'd really want to find out what that means when he says that.
Yeah, if he's talking about a broadcast. If he's talking about a broadcast truck, the issue is that the broadcast trucks are generally running on union labor. And so the thing is that you can't, if you start doing non-union jobs in your union truck, in a truck that normally is union, probably 99% of a broadcast truck is going to be union operators that are in there. If you're doing sports or doing things on a regular basis, and so you do one job that's non-union, and it's just going to be harder to fill the truck. Like if it gets out, it'll be harder for him to fill the truck on all the other ones. So he's probably looking at this as one corporate job or one job that he's got to do, and it's probably not his bread and butter. And his bread and butter requires union labor. And so what happens is you get to the venue, and what will happen is local whatever, local 153 will say, hey, this truck's here all the time. But in this case, but they're always having union, but now they're not hiring union. All kinds of bad things can happen. So the thing is like, he's just like, keeping the union happy in a large, I've done, when I first started, I had 3 or 4, folks on a union call. By the end of what I was doing at Pixel Core, we would have 75 to 100 people on our union call. And you think a lot about how to keep the union happy. This is their house. Like if you go to a venue that's a union venue, or you go to a truck, this is their place, and you need to like figure out how when in Rome, you do as the Romans do. So I think that's the so you have to be very careful. He has to be very careful about that. And so I think that that's probably what you're running up against, is that you're an outlier for his truck, and his truck is on a day-to-day using union labor, and he doesn't want to cross that line. Next question.
Next question is from Samuel Nordvik in Norway. What are the strengths and weaknesses of Viz Vector versus vMix for cloud production?
Good, Jonas.
I think it depends on what type of feature set you're looking for and what type of mind state you're coming from. Viz Vector has a great feature set. It is really nicely optimized. We've seen it have higher performance than vMix. So if you go into the higher input count, higher performance, that's where you would want to look into that. If you look at the interface, if you are used to hardware and the TriCaster paradigm and the hardware paradigm, you'll be more at home with that. vMix more is a software switcher from the paradigm. Viz Vector, of course, is also a software switcher and then allows you to extend from the typical hardware panel idea. But vMix at the really down level is way more from a software switcher level, a scene-based editor, at least how we use vMix, than Viz Vector. And that's one of the advantages that we have found with vMix, is if you do a lot of multi-box looks, a lot of different things, a lot of composites. That's what I have found a bit easier, or a whole lot easier in vMix, especially with the new layer manager, than in Viz Vector. One thing also to note is if you start Viz, it will take over that whole instance. It will show the screen and you won't be able to really use Windows. So one thing to keep in mind is that, like we do in our deployment for office hours, you probably want to have an EIC instance. Think about files. What do you need to do on that instance? How before you start the process? With vMix, it's more like a program, and you can still do things on the other desktop. So we often have vMix running and Zoom on the other ground. Then also pricing-wise, this is definitely a bit more expensive. If you want to get into it, I would just say go with vMix. It's $50 a month if you do the rental. And at that point, you can scale way faster and easier. But both of them have advantages, right? Like if you already know the TriCaster and you're familiar with that, you maybe even have TriCaster panels. This is a great alternative. And hopefully soon we'll also see the ROS offering that they are doing with Carbonite codes also come into display. And I think we'll have a really nice layout of options. But I think with everything, they're both this helps traditional TDs ease a little into software-based switching. Because if we transition people that are mainly on site to the next step of like cloud production, what it really is, you need to transition your TDs from a hardware-based workflow to a software-based workflow. That's the biggest step. Then where the software runs is the lower steps. And I've seen this help with that because it has a more traditional, like, hey, here's your keys, here's your MEs, all of that. That is, you could build that in vMix, but it's not as easy to build that in vMix. And then Viz does a lot with multi-channel audio as well. So you have up to 8 channels, more NDI outputs and all that. So both of them have advantages in their own thing. We are still very happy with vMix for our cloud productions, and Office Hours is very happy with Viz Vector, and a lot of people are happy with Viz. It's at the end, it's a cost and a flavor and paradigm question.
Good guy.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to get my hands on it yet, but one of the things that Jonas is mentioning is the fact that he's an expert on setting up instances in the cloud. Over the years, we've evolved. You know, it's taken time to set up these security groups that he was alluding to earlier. And one of the safe things about setting up with Viz is that it's all pre-made. They put a nice skin over the AWS instances. You just say you want one, and boop, their little backend builds the stuff. And Jonas and I have spent hours building instances by hand, and then now we have scripts. And so over the years, we've got it down to a science. But for somebody new to this, Viz just makes it super easy. When I watch them just click, add, and it's like spin up for me, it makes life really elegant. So take a look at it, and there's some nice demos. In fact, they were on here for the first time where they show that back end of how to pop in those new instances versus us going in there and manually doing it. If you do it by hand, we did that great 3-part series that's in the officehours.global site, and you can watch that and see how it took hours and hours to put one together. Or you could hire somebody like Jonas to or Jeff Keithley or any of these guys to build it for you and build out a more granular infrastructure. But at the end of the day, it's only $50-$60 for a vMix license, and I'm not sure what the cost is of Viz. I haven't seen the public pricing.
Yeah, so and we're going to be using Viz for the Monday evening session. So we're going to start a show. The first test will be on Monday, and it's using Viz or Vector. So we're using Vector for that, and we've got a growing group of people. If you're interested in being part of that group, we're going to give a lot of people opportunities to cut the show. We're looking at basically, I use MimoLive for my fireside. We use our much larger system for this show. We'll be using Vector for the Monday show, and it will take a week off after the first one so we can kind of have a little time to work on it, and then we'll come back and probably do it every week. And so we'll be looking at the one thing you can do working inside of office hours. You can get the free version. It's got a watermark on it, but you can get a free version to play with of Viz, and you'll also we'll be having more and more opportunities. We're working pretty closely with the Viz team, so we'll be able to do sessions. We'll be doing more sessions with them, both in the second hours as well as doing labs with them. So so there'll be. So I would highly recommend getting into the Viz into our Vector group so that you can download it, start to play with it, come up with the questions. Just write down the questions that I don't understand this, I don't understand that, I don't understand this. Our goal is to build 30 or 40 people in the group that understand how to use Vector. And so we have a license. That is from that Vector Viz is providing for us. So we'll have an unmarked version that we're going to use for our show, but you can do everything that we're doing with a small Viz RT logo at the bottom to do your test to figure out if this is something that's right for you. And we expect to learn a lot about it. The more we use it, the more I'm excited about doing production in the cloud. So I think that I think that we're kind of keep on kind of rolling that direction from an office hours perspective. Next question.
Talalik Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina asks, I watched a great podcast where Chris Fenwick talks about his editing workflow. Recommend it highly. Chris, can you tell us more about it?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Talalik texted me this morning. He goes, hey, do you mind if I ask this question on office hours? I said, wait a second, you're asking my permission to ask a question about me to me so that I can talk about me? Yeah, I'm okay with that. It was a great podcast. It was mostly me. And so that
made it great.
It was awesome. No, basically it was Sam Messman and Jace Sparks. And they do a little show called Elevate. And I had done one episode of the show about a month ago, and at the end of it, Sam asked me some question, and I go, "Oh, well, here, let me show you how I do that." And I showed him, a wide shot of my desk here, and he's like, this is our show. Why are you holding out? So I came back a couple weeks later, and I just did a walkthrough of how I edit remotely. And I have this very strong opinion that non-synchronous client comments, in other words, are asynchronous, where I just post something on frame and let you tool around and try and invent words to describe how you're displeased with something. And then I have to read your words, which fail us, and I have to try and interpret what you meant by your words. It's just a nightmare. And I think that the far and away the best way to edit is in real time with a client, if not sitting over your shoulder like the old days, sitting on Zoom with you. And I also talk a lot about how important the nonverbal communication that you get by watching somebody watch a timeline. And the way we work, you can be staring at the play out, and I get to watch your face the whole time. So I see every little nervous tick and whatever when you're watching something, and I take a lot out of that. And so we just went through the whole workflow of a little bit what Alex, you and I did, where we did the audio workflow and how to do all that. And if you get it figured out and everything, it works just so much better. Also, quite interesting. We for the last 4 years together have immersed ourselves in the ability to share our screens and whatnot and all that. And when I pointed out to Jace that the screen share feature of all the conferencing tools favors resolution over frame rate, he had never thought about that. He had never thought about the low frame rate that you get when you say, well, let me show you my screen. And when I explained to him what the ATEM does in terms of taking your screen and making it into a webcam and giving you, 30 frames per second or whatever, I mean, you could see gray matter splash all over his camera lens when his head exploded. It was crazy. And so it really set him off in terms of thinking about ways that he could solve a whole bunch of other problems, which frankly I didn't understand. But that's what we did. We just talked about how to edit remotely in real time, as opposed to using I'm going to post something, I'm going to let you fiddle with it and then try and write words. And I think it's the greatest detriment to the editorial process in the last 20 years is everybody just relying on asynchronous comments. I think as an editor, I think it's a horrible workflow. For clients, I get it, because they can, watch it in the middle of the night. They can watch it early in the morning. They can comment on it whenever they want, as long as they understand that they are choosing the less efficient way to work.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that we found with some of the workflows that we've had in the last year or so is what's really good is having the first round or two done asynchronously. Like they just look at some stuff and go, oh, this is obviously not what I want, blah, 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 blah. And then we sit down and after we've gotten through the big stuff of it, we sit down and make sure that we're screen sharing to the client and going through stuff that we're looking at and having a discussion. Also. But the idea is that the first round or two, we just want to get to a place where that we're close. And now we're sitting there talking about and things that even though they said, we bring up as well, did you remember that shot we had in there? That might actually be good here. But that kind of horse trading happens after they're not upset with something.
Right.
So that's what I found. Also, there's we're out of the they have to wait, because what I didn't want to do is have them wait for our editor to fiddle with something for 15 minutes while after they said it. I'd rather get all that done so it's mostly a clean show, and a technically clean show. And now we're not niggling with things. We're just we just take notes on those things.
But I would also say that one of my favorite parts of editing in the old days was the first day, because you come in and they're all excited and they throw all their media on the counter and you start loading tapes or drives, whatever. But you get this, there's an inception of the idea where they start to explain what we're trying to do here. And in many cases, the editor's first experience with a project is that moment. And I think that when you just get a bunch of stuff sent to you and say, here's a script, glue this together, do it. It's I need that inspiration of that first conversation. So a lot of times producers forget how important that first meeting is. Like, let me be a part of that. Let me, because it may very well be before we do anything, because part of my job is I watch a lot of other stuff. And you're going to throw out some ideas. I'm going to go, that's kind of like this or that. And they'll go, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, maybe we could do that. And then all of a sudden, the whole project kind of morphs and does a little shift just from that first conversation.
Yeah, and I have to admit, like my first experience with an editor and director sitting was with Ben Burtt and George Lucas. And so we would sit in the back, and what we would do is, my job was to sit there and listen to them talk, and then they would go, well, we'll make a shot like that, and then that was my next week. like I make a shot next week, and then this next Friday we'll sit down and do this again. And I think that there was such an incredible amount of power where we're not dealing with found goods, we're not dealing with what we shot. Like we were making up what the story was going to be. You had a couple of animators there built, it was 4 of us that would build all the shots that you thought would be good in that shot. And then you'd put them in, into the edit. And then you would look at how they all flow. And then when we were done, they'd go out and shoot it. And it was not exactly, when they shot it, we found other things that we could shoot. But man,
you're
having
talking about
rail,
specifically the previs stuff?
Yeah, the previs was just like, but it was being edited. We were sitting on an Avid and edited. Ben Burtt's son was like Anakin, and he had like this. He was like he would be holding on to this tub, and he had a green screen behind him, and Ben would just kind of key in AVR6 is not good. So anyway, there was just like this rough AVR6 over top of a background that we'd build for him, and it was a lot of fun. And the only reason I bring it up is that I think we're getting to a point where those tools are becoming something that you don't need. With all the motion capture we had. With Manus that came in and all the stuff, there's so many things we can do very quickly and just hash out the idea before we even, get to the cameras, which I think is really interesting.
And I think that the increased technological support that we've had for the last 20 years, whatever, it has caused a lot of, especially young producers, to sort of forget that what we're doing here is we're communicating emotions quite often. Mm-hmm. And emotions come from the soul. And when the origin of the emotion, the producer, and the technician of the emotion, the editor, are put in the same room, the emotions amplify each other. Yeah. And so the separation and the asynchronous reviews, it's detrimental. And I think it's important to let people be in a room or in a Zoom room together and work together.
Yeah, there is something about the whole group being in. I know when I'm shooting something with my brother, my number one thing that I do, because my brother is way better than I am. So I think that when you have a respect for that process, that I just go, I look at it, he'll be looking at something, I go, so what do you think? Like I'm the one that's supposed to make the decision, but I'm just asking him, like, where do you want to put the camera? What do you think? And he'll sit there and if you get used to, you hire people that you can respect that way. Brent Bai is another person I work with a lot, and the same thing, I just go, what do you want? He's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what do you want to do? Where are we going here? And I love hiring people who are better at that one vertical than I am, and then being able to take advantage of that rather than telling everybody what to do and directing it all is to, like when you're working with an editor. Well, what do you, like I've worked with you and I go, well, what do you think? I don't, there's things that I'll pick at, but I try to leave it to the person who's better than me at that thing, because Chris is far better at it anyway. So as Chris says, I edit, he's an editor. There's people
who can edit and there's editors. They're totally different people.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the person that can edit. Chris is an editor. So I lean on Chris a lot to make those decisions and make those processes. All right, next question.
Next question is from the QR code. Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois asks, what is ferrule and how do I crimp them for my GAC? It seems like a foreign thing, so I don't know if I want it in my grup.
So here's the thing. We don't know the answer to this. I didn't even know what a GAC was before you asked this question, but I just want to point out that we did lean on ChatGPT. This will be a ChatGPT answer because we have no idea. I don't feel bad. When I saw it, I don't feel bad that I didn't know. A ferrule is a small cylindrical or tube-shaped metal sleeve used to create a secure connection at the end of a cable or wire. Steps to crimp ferrules for galvanized aircraft cable. That's the GAC. Choose the correct ferrule size. Ensure that the ferrule size matches the diameter of your GAC. The ferrule should fit snugly over the cable without being too loose or too tight. Prepare the cable. cut the cable to the desired length using a cable cutter. Ensure that the cut is clean and ends are not frayed. 3, insert the cable into the ferrule. Insert the end of the cable into the ferrule. If using a loop, insert the cable back through the ferrule to create a loop size that you need. Position the ferrule. Ensure that the ferrule is positioned correctly, typically leaving a small amount of cable protruding from the end of the ferrule. Using a crimping tool. Use the crimping tool designed to the ferrule side. I think that's pretty good. If I didn't know anything, I could have sounded really, really useful there. So anyway, I just thought it was fun. When I don't know something like this, I ask Jet. Now I'll go search and look for videos, but I'm always surprised at how quickly I can do it. But what I will say is, given what you're talking about, my number one thing is have someone who knows what they're doing do this. Like, as soon as you see what this is and you see the instructions, they're nice and clear, but you should never do that. Like, you should never do that unless you've done it before. Let someone who's done it 100 times, if you're going to pull anything with it, let make sure that somebody else who has done it before does it in front of you, and most of the time until you've done 100 of them, and then you can start doing things that actually matter. Go ahead, Chris.
If you want to watch something super satisfying, watch an electrician work, because they have all the right stripping tools. They have all the right crimping tools. It's super enjoyable, and that's what we're talking about. You got to have the right crimping tools.
Watch anyone with 10 years of thoughtful experience do anything is just, I just love watching. You know, I love everyone who has a lot of skill. And when I say thoughtful, it means that they did it, they thought about it, they've gotten better at it. You can do a lot of things for 10 years and not get any better if you're not thinking about it while you're doing it. Next question.
Another QR code question from Zach Jeffers in Inland Pacific Northwest. I noticed that the TWiT network was experimenting with Restream Studio for switching this week's episode of Security Now. Any insight into the choice of experimenting with Restream versus something more internal like MimoLive, vMix, and other options?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So I think in this point, and I have no inside scoop, it's probably like with most things like this, the path of least resistance. One of these tools, Restream Studio, you take out your credit card, you enter it into a website, and you got it, and you can test it. And they already used Restream to deliver their streams in the past, so they probably already had an account. With something like MimoLive, vMix, and other options, where you have a way deeper pool of what you can do, it also means you need to build all of that. You need to build all your looks. You don't have any presets that you can just use. And then you also have to manage the hardware. You have to manage how do you get the feeds in there. So there's a lot more to manage except then just put your credit card in, which is why I see a lot of people still go with simpler solutions like Restream Studio for switching, because it's really simple. It's provided for you. It's a switcher as a service. And for the other ones, you have to build up your same thing. It takes you, and it's kind of like, where do you want to put your ceiling? Like with Restream Studio, you have a ceiling of how good you can be. With the other ones, you have a ceiling that you need to break through to get to the same product that Restream is. You need to put in a bunch of work, money, time, and effort to get to the same product that you get easily with Restream Studio. But then the sky is the limit. Like, you can do whatever you want. You can add more graphics, playouts, all the cool things that all of those platforms offer. But as a start, you do need to put in a bunch of work to make it look nice, work easily, be easily cuttable, add remote support, all that.
Next question.
Next question is from Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts. As I was experimenting with what I needed for an in-home studio, I overbought Blackmagic design equipment. Does Office Hours accept in-kind donations? Latest equipment, excellent condition.
Yes, absolutely. So you can reach out to me. We'll make sure that we get the forms for you so that they're considered a donation. We are a 501c3, and we would definitely very much appreciate that. Yeah, we thank you so much, Francis. Reach out to me, and we'll make sure that you get the paperwork for that donation. So thanks so much, and we appreciate the support. Next question.
Jonathan Michelson in Buenos Aires, Argentina asks, how does the software control side of the legacy PTZ cameras like the Canon CR-N300 fare against more modern offerings by Birddog and PTZoptics? particularly biased for extra remote operation features and full NDI IP workflows.
Go ahead, Jonas.
I had to chuckle when I read legacy, because legacy for me is when you need to use a serial connector and have a really weird controller, and your life is just miserable because you need to use serial and you can't use IP or companion. The CR-N300 is like 3-ish years old. It's a great camera. It does support NDI and IP. They are not making it a big of a sale as they do, but they have SRT, they have 3D, so you can do tracking. They have NDI, control through NDI. They have Visca. So Visca is a protocol that you probably know from the serial space, but Visca over IP is basically the extension. It is supported by a lot of cameras, even by that PTZoptics and Birddog probably. One thing we found with Birddog cameras is, and I haven't looked at any of the cameras that came out after this, after the OEM changed, or that's how it looks like from the outside. But we had a lot of issues with their remote control protocols where the companion plugin suddenly would be like, I don't know the parameters, and the Birddog would just send data that doesn't make sense, where we had an internal data corruption. What's always important is that you have a way to reboot those cameras. I would say the only thing, like if you mention PTZoptics, that's where you could mention the Hive software. That might be a more modern offering. But the Canon CR-N300 is perfectly fine. And on a legacy project or legacy camera, I think it was the UE100 that I used together with JJ for a product. And we had to install Internet Explorer to get to its web interface. Then you know you have a problem. But I think as long as you have an IP connectivity, everything will be fine.
Next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Tuesday, June 25th, South by Southwest begins accepting speaking proposals for next year's conference via South by Southwest PanelPicker. Any ideas for panels?
I don't know. My problem is that applying for a panel would mean I'd actually have to leave my house. So if South by Southwest starts to accept remote panelists, we'll jump in right away. And I say this, I don't say this in an empty way. Every conference that I talk to now, I'm like, can you just have one room that has a screen? Just a screen, and we'll build it for you. We'll fill that room with great people from all over the world that would never spend time to come all the way to somewhere, but are happy to do a conversation in front of people, which I just think it is crazy that South by Southwest and others doesn't have one of their tracks be a virtual appearances, because there's so many people you don't get what I call the 5 nines, the 99.999% of the people that aren't going to come to your event, aren't going to speak at your event, aren't going to show up at your event. How do we serve those? That's the future. That's what we have to start to figure out. Next question.
Next question is from Jeff Calvadas in Chicago, Illinois. What do you use to monitor your Mac's performance? I'm especially looking for something with menu bar graphs or alerts.
Go ahead, Terry.
Well, you can just use, for me anyway, I just use the activity monitor that's built into your Mac. Just would go over to, let me switch over to the camera here. All right, so this is it. There's many options. You have just go in and you can actually turn on various things.
There's some of the stuff there. But
okay.
And we're running out of time.
Well, anyway, right. So, yeah, that's fine. But just take a look at Activity Monitor that's built in.
And there you go. And the other one that a lot of us use is iStat menus. I have iStat menus on every machine I own. Like I can look up at the top of the menu and see what's going on, and very quickly move from there. We'll be talking about IP infrastructure next, so Jason's getting ready. He's on the job here. But just a quick reminder that tomorrow we'll have open Q&A for 1 hour. So Saturday's a little bit shorter. But we'd love to have your questions. Go ahead and throw them into AskOfficeHours.global right now, and we'll address them tomorrow. We will not have the volunteer meeting today. I just want to make sure to lay it out for everybody. We're not having the volunteer meeting. I'm assuming tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm on a production. So we're going to put that off for 1 week. We had 5 Saturdays this week, this time. So we're going to move that volunteer meeting to next Saturday. So stay tuned for that. And Sunday, of course, is introspection. It's when we just talk about what we're doing here. Why are we doing it here? How are things working? So if you've got ideas, if you've got complaints, if you've got questions, Sunday is the day for you. so make sure to jump in. And that's what we talk about. We talked about how we structure the second hour for 40 minutes last Sunday, and we made some changes. Also, if you'd like to support us, Francis, thank you very much. But if you'd like to support us with money, also, you can go to officehours.global/donate. We are completely run by donations. Thanks.